Welcome to Cycling Demystified, brought to you by Foundation Bike Fit and Frequency Cycle Works, the podcast where we help you take your cycling to the next level by sharing the knowledge from experienced bike fitters, mechanics, and the hidden players within the bike industry.
Welcome back to the podcast, and welcome back to our mini-series on the 6 modern bike fit mistakes. And these are mistakes that we see on a daily basis within the Bike Fit studio, and the aim of this series is to give you information and the knowledge that we see on a daily basis so that you can take some of these nuggets of knowledge and improve your ride, take your riding to the next level, maybe not fall into some of these mistakes and traps. And yeah, so if we listen through this episode, then you'll have an idea of some of the mistakes that we see, but also some of the solutions that we recommend. And today we are talking all about geometry, or misconceptions of geometry, and specifically around fit geometry. There is also handling geometry, which we will see if we can touch on as well, but mostly about kind of fit geometry and some of the tricky navigation that I think riders have to kind of find their way around particularly when choosing bikes and understanding what the bike fit, or sorry, not bike fit, but the bike industry is feeding them. If you haven't been here before, I'm your host Way from Foundation Bike Fit, and I'm joined today by
Grumpy Old Matt,
Grumpy,
who is also from Foundation Bike Fit, Chief Executive Solutions Provider.
General Solutions.
I've given myself a promotion since the last time.
Nice. Yeah. Is that going on your card?
I haven't got a card yet.
Yeah. Or email signature. Should do that.
If I can figure out how to do it.
Chief Executive Solutions Provider.
Exactly.
Nice. You heard it here first, chaps. Chapesses. Chapesses? Say that.
Folks.
I'll stick to generic.
Stick to folks.
All right, what do we want to talk about geometry today then?
Yeah, it's a big... Another, you like picking big topics, don't you?
Well, we come here to, do the big things.
It's true.
Go big or go home.
Indeed.
But,
so we're going to focus on fit geometry for the most part.
Yeah.
Even though fit geometry and handling geometry, do go hand in hand.
Yeah. I know. Let's stick with the fit geometry concepts first.
Okay.
And then we can see if we can blend them into the handling geometry too. Because, a bike has got to fit, but it's also got to steer well.
Correct.
At the same time.
Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yeah. Which actually, maybe that's a good place to start. Usually blows people's mind when we say, oh, well, we can actually fit you probably on 3 different frame sizes.
Mm.
So how do we,
How do you choose?
How do you choose? And actually how you choose is dependent on the handling of the bike. Oh, I dug myself a hole.
Dug yourself a hole there, aren't you? Yeah. Let's wind it back.
All
fit
right.
geometry.
Fit geometry, marketing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. Let's start with marketing.
Marketing.
The bike industry does not have your best interests at heart. Let's just lay that out there first and foremost.
Well, I think the bike industry works on averages. It wants neat kind of buckets to put every person into.
I would argue that's a secondary function of what the bike industry actually works on, which is the bottom line at the bottom of a spreadsheet.
Well, it wants to sell stuff, right?
Exactly.
So how do you sell stuff? You make
Market
stuff. Yeah, you make stuff that fits the majority of people at some point.
Yeah, the 5'11", 180 centimetre average male.
Yeah.
That is what the bike industry is built around.
Bike fitting is about individualization.
Correct.
Which is about finding what works for each individual and their specific goals. So it's no surprise that we're at loggerheads. I guess.
Well, I say bike fitting should be about the individual. There's levels to this game, as you know.
Yes, very much so.
So bike fitting should be aimed at the individual and finding a unique solution for that person.
I guess just like...
I've got a bit of a bee in my bonnet.
Yeah, I don't like the word should so much, but
this is the reality, isn't it?
Well, our approach to bike fitting
yeah.
is very much about finding the best solutions for that individual and their riding goals.
Correct.
I think that's an important distinction, not just the person, but what they're trying to achieve on their bike. And so, like, I guess maybe this concept came about when we were discussing with someone about buying a stock bike. And if you go and try and buy a stock bike and expect that that stock bike is going to fit you just right, or even if you're any person and you sell them a stock bike, the chance that that stock bike is going to fit you perfectly in every possible variable, so your handlebar width, the handlebar reach, the stem length, the amount of spaces that you've got, the crank length, the saddle, the seat post setback, all of the different kind of variables on the bike.
And that's before you've even got into the frame.
And into the frame geometry itself, the shape of it. The chance of all of those things being exactly right for you to get the best out of your body is basically less than 1%, I'd say. You might get close. Like I recommended, heaven forbid, a Canyon bike the other day, which is actually like almost perfect for this lady. She just needs to change a saddle, and it would have been great straight out the box for her. But that hardly ever happens.
That hardly ever happens.
And so I think the best that, bike manufacturers can hope for is that, they get somewhat close to an average fit.
Yeah, it's good enough.
It's good enough. Like, you can sit on the bike and you can pedal it and make modifications to the bike as you progress as a rider, as you begin to understand your individual needs, and therefore, off you go. But, that it's already a compromise of like, you build for the average, and so, it fits nobody, really. And so I think that's the kind of central concept that we wanted to get across to people, that the bike that you buy can be better. It can be better for you and your riding goals. And I think riders do understand this as they go through their life cycle, as they buy new bikes and they kind of have the experience of riding a certain bike, or we've talked about it on the podcast before, riding bikes that are too big or too small, and just using that as a tool to like understand, what actually is a good riding bike, what actually feels good, what actually is comfortable, what allows me to perform at my best. But I guess the modern mistake that we see is that it's just far too easy to go and buy a bike, I think.
3 or 4 clicks.
Yeah.
You spend 10 grand.
Yeah.
Cheers.
I know, it's crazy, isn't it?
Madness.
And added to that, the modern kind of complication is that bikes are becoming less adjustable. And there's more complication around marketing terms, as everyone is competing for different spaces within the bike industry, because there are so many bike brands out there. It's kind of crazy. There's so many bikes out there. There's so many carbon bikes that have been churned out through the industry factories and so on, and so it's super easy. Go on AliExpress and just buy a bike. But if you've ever looked at those geometries, they're pretty mad, or they definitely fit only a certain type of morphology. So I think we just wanted to kind of break some of that down today, go through some of those misconceptions, and give people some knowledge around maybe how to go about choosing the right kind of bike for their bodies, and how you can go about that kind of process.
So you hit a key word there, Body.
Body.
That's where you start. As always, it's not about the bike. It's about the body. So if we kind of just go high level, generally speaking, and this is a general rule, there's kind of like two distinct shapes of bikes, or traditionally there was two distinct shapes of bikes. One which is long in the reach, low in the stack, and one which is tall in the stack and short in the reach.
Yeah, I think we need to explain what stack and reach are.
So stack and reach is how we describe bikes. It is the only consistent way of comparison we have across different frame sizes. Because if you think about, like, even if you're just looking at different brands, so Giant go small, medium, large, large. What's a medium large? Nobody really knows. Specialized go 54, 56, 58, go even numbers. A lot of like Western brands kind of do that as well. If you're into your Italian brands, they'll generally go in odd numbers, so 53, 55, 57, 59. And then, you know, there's other brands that go number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Oh, yeah, Pearson.
Yeah, there you go. So if you want a Pearson, you've got no reference point. And there's loads of other stuff in between as well. So the first thing is we need a standardized way of comparison between all of these different sizes of bikes. It's like shoes. You have a Nike shoe and an Adidas shoe in the same size, they're going to feel completely different. So the only way to compare is by using a standardized metric, and those two metrics are stack and reach. And what those two measurements are is, if we take reach as the first one, it is effectively the x-axis, so how long things are from a central point on the bike, i.e.
the horizontal measurement.
The horizontal measurement. So from the bottom bracket to whatever point you're measuring to on the horizontal axis, that's what we call reach, or on the x-axis. And then on the y-axis, which is stack, this is how tall things are, so the vertical axis. And by using these metrics or measurements, you have a objective mathematical way of comparison that doesn't care about naming conventions.
Yeah. So every bike frame will have a frame stack and a frame reach number, which basically describes how tall a bike frame is and how long a bike frame is.
And if you're looking at a bike that doesn't have frame, stack and reach on a geometry chart, don't buy it.
Yeah, because it's become the standardized way of describing bike frames.
There's not many standards in the bike industry, but that is one, thankfully.
Yeah. So thank you, Dan Enfield,
for
creating
for sorting that out.
Yeah. He was a bike fitter.
Yeah, he was. Yeah. Well, he founded a bike brand.
Yeah.
So bike fitter, founded a bike brand, and has solved a lot of problems for us over the years. It's also created a few, but there you go.
Anyway.
But so all we have is frame stack and frame reach. There are other things to consider as well, but we'll focus on those two for now. So all we're really interested in with fit geometry is how long does the bike need to be, and that is in terms of your frame reach, but also your handlebar reach and your hood reach, and also how tall does it need to be in terms of frame stack, handlebar stack, hood stack. This is the front end of the bike. So when you break it down, it's actually pretty simple. Like, all we care about is how tall things are and how far away things are from a central point on the bike. And dependent on your body shape, your mobility, your functionality, all these things can influence whether or not you're going to be more comfortable on one shape of bike or another. And when you think of it like that, it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah. So shall we give you as an example?
This is the point where my mother would say, and you can keep him.
Yeah.
So my bike's basically squares. Because I'm built like a swimmer. I have a ridiculously long torso, relatively large ape index, and really short, dumpy, stumpy legs. So my bikes, in order to be comfortable, need to be very long on the horizontal axis.
Because your torso
Because my torso extends quite a lot, and I've got pretty long arms. So I can cover a lot of distance horizontally, but I can't cover much distance vertically. So my saddle and my handlebars are basically the same height, because I'm getting old now. I can't really hinge as well as I used to. But I'm way more comfortable on a bike that would be deemed kind of like a aggressive position, where the reach is longer, the stack is slightly lower, because that's how my body works on a bike. If I ride something what is deemed as a quote unquote endurance bike, which is usually shorter in the reach and taller at the front end, I don't have enough room to rotate my pelvis, extend my torso, and get my arms in to the gap between the saddle and the handlebars. So I end up being cramped and facing all kinds of problems with my back and my hips. So all we really care about is finding the right shape of bike frame for someone's morphology. So whether they're kind of torso dominant or leg dominant, and their functionality, their mobility, and their ability to control that function within the context of riding a bike.
Yeah. I'd say riding discipline also comes into it.
There is that as well, yeah. So relative to your goals, your hopes, dreams, ambitions, like that. Because just because we can put your nose on the front tyre doesn't necessarily mean that we should.
Yeah. So I think that's
That was a lot, wasn't it?
Hopefully that kind of made sense in terms of, how your body shape kind of determines what shape your bike frame should be too. And there's a degree of adjustment within that, because you can fit, say, longer stems or longer handlebars to create more length within the bike, or kind of more spacers underneath the kind of stem or kind of riser bars and things like that to get more height or less height or whatever you need. So this is where we said at the beginning, you can create the same position across like 3 different frame sizes using different component sizes. But bikes are also designed to kind of handle well within certain parameters. So if you're kind of at the extreme of like adjustment or kind of length of certain variables, so let's say you've got 50 millimeters of spacers under the stem, and your stem length is 140 millimeters, and you've got 100 mil Bontrager bars on there to create the right kind of handlebar position. This isn't going to just sitting right at the extreme end range of that adjustment probably isn't going to create a bike that feels as good as a bike frame that can create a more balanced position. And there's a little bit of, I don't know, would you say there's a bit of art within creating a bike that sits in a balanced kind of way?
Oh, definitely, yeah. Well, art, do I want to use that word? No.
Yeah, I don't.
It's logic and reason.
Yeah.
And it's not art. There's no art to it. It's just maths. Yeah. But what is often overlooked in terms, and this is where kind of fit geometry and handling geometry kind of start to merge. Yeah. And we haven't even talked about the back end of the bike yet, which we will get onto, because I feel passionately about seat tube angles, because I'm sad. But if you're kind of like, there's no art to it, but if you're within, so bikes are designed to feel best or most stable or most predictable or like most kind of responsive, whatever that word means. They're designed to kind of perform optimally within a certain range of adjustment, right? So if I take if you take like a 54 centimeter frame, like say a 54 tarmac, right? Yeah. So that bike is designed to work best with something around a 90 to a 120 mil stem. Yeah. Right, and that's where those designers have gone, right, okay, the handlebars in this position relative to the front hub, relative to the rake of the fork, the head tube angle, the trail figure, this is where we want the bike to perform best. This is where we've designed it to feel best, and this is where it's going to be most predictable, most fun within this kind of like parameter. Now you can go outside of these parameters, but there is a potential drawback into the way the bike will feel, even though the fit parameter might be better. So chances are then that you want to look at a different bike rather than compromise how the bike was designed to feel. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, you with me?
Yeah,
I know
still here.
I'm boring myself here. But one like
It's all gold. It's all
it's all
gold.
gold. But one massive thing that we kind of like, and this goes in terms of like fashion as well, is we're trying to make the stem great again. But there was like a period of time where it was very much de rigueur to have a very long stem. And no stack, no Spencer stack, and all this kind of stuff. And the bikes probably felt pretty janky to ride.
Yeah.
Like I recall your story of crashing a Cervelo R5 rearing down an Alp, riding a stupid position. So the bikes are designed to handle best regardless of whether the fit parameters are good or not. So like you were saying, if you've got like 50 mils of Spencer stack, tree trunk of a stem, and you're right on the edge of it, there's probably a better bike out there for you. So this is where you can start to use your kind of fit parameters to think critically about, is this bike going to create the ride feel that I want? And this is where fit geometry and handling geometry kind of come together. And then if you really get into it, you can play around with different like fork rakes to create different trail figures and all this kind of stuff, so you can have a bit more of an influence in how your bike handles relative to your fit geometry, your position on the bike. And this is where geometry gets fun. So I've gone off on a bit of a tangent here, but basically what we're saying is that you want to be in the middle of the range of adjustment of the bike as possible, because that's where the bike has, A, and 1, been designed to feel best, but B, and 2, it gives you scope to change your position as your body changes without compromising the feel of the bike. That was a really long-winded way to get to that conclusion.
I've actually got a bit of a corrections corner, actually.
Oh yeah, go on,
make. We were very much... I got a lovely email from a listener the other day who was listening to a recent podcast that we had put out about the geometry of bike handling. Whether or not people care about it or not. So we're going through similar kind of conversations again. But on that, I think we started discussing the differences between the old Super 6, like Cannondale Super 6, and the new Cannondale Super 6. And we were talking about how...
I think I know where this is going.
Because
I checked myself on it.
Oh, did you?
As well.
So it was, I can't remember, it's probably Ev, because like he was talking about stuff.
It might have been me, actually.
Or you.
Yeah, I know exactly where this is going, because we went and had a look, and we were like, oh.
But like, the news, like, I think this was like, I think it was spurred by an article by someone else, actually, that we had read, and they're like, oh, they've changed the geometry of the kind of new Super 6, because the stack is a little bit taller and the reach is a little bit shorter or something. They've changed it so that and the head angle is a little bit slacker, and so they were like, oh, they've changed the geometry. Why has it got less aggressive?
The trail's the same, though.
But yes.
Yeah.
So they, even though the head angle of the new bike is less steep than the old bike, which if you had used the same fork, would have produced a slower steering bike, which is not so advantageous for a race bike, because you want your race bike to be responsive and steer quickly. But this was in response to, our listener pointed out, the kind of increasing tyre sizes. So when you increase the tyre size, that essentially creates more room. And so like you have to kind of push the fork out, and it changes the trail. If you don't know what trail is, I'll put a link in and you can read up about it. There's loads of like kind of articles about trail, wheel flop, things like that, but I'm not going to go into that now. But essentially it's a measure of how quickly a bike will steer. And so with a bigger tyre, then it changes that trail figure and essentially kind of like can slow the bike down a little bit. And to compensate for that, then you change the fork angle or the rake of the fork, and that compensates for the bigger tyre. But in order to, if you change that rake, then you need to, change the kind of head angle as well of the bike itself. So everything kind of relates back together again. And so even though the frame geometry looks like it's changed, that the handling geometry of the bike theoretically should be the same as the old Super 6, and it's just dealing with like a bigger tyre size.
Yeah, I know exactly what we were talking about here. So we were talking about the differences between the 54 and the 56.
Right.
And the fact that the 54, the head tube angle is like way slacker on the 54 than it is on the 56.
So they must have used a different fork.
So they've used a different fork because the trail is the same across all the bikes.
Right.
So, and this is where
good.
I knew as soon as I said it, I was like, I need to check this. So but that's a really good catch. And do call us out on our bullshit.
Yeah.
Because we talk a lot. But yeah, so the trail across the size run is the same.
Yeah. So theoretically, all the bikes should steer the same.
Yeah.
So that's just a quick illustration of, like a bike is designed to steer and feel a certain way, and how designers across different sizes try and keep everything the same. But you can affect that by, how you position your body, essentially where your weight goes over the bike.
Which brings us nicely onto seat tube angle.
Oh, your favourite.
My favourite, my bugbear with the bike industry.
So we've talked about the front end of the bike. We're going to talk about the back end of the bike. So why is seat tube angle important?
So you have not only stack and reach at the front of the bike, you also have stack and reach at the back of the bike, but in terms of the saddle. So how tall your saddle is relative to the bottom bracket, and this is measured on both a vertical axis and the kind of effective or the actual saddle height. So from a set point on the saddle straight down to the bottom bracket.
Yeah.
And then you also have saddle reach or saddle X, which is how far behind the bottom bracket a set point on the saddle is. So if you haven't read Way's piece on the biomechanical reference point in the newsletter.
And a podcast.
We did a podcast on that as well.
I'll put some links in the notes for those.
Go read it, because I'm not explaining that here. But it's essentially a consistent point on the saddle in which measurements can be taken.
Yeah.
So you have saddle X and saddle Y, which dictate where you sit relative to the bottom bracket. And this is important for achieving your desired saddle position. Now, because we live in the modern world and bikes are getting more and more like spaceships, and proprietary components seem to be de rigueur at the moment, so D-shaped seat posts, looking at you, Giant.
Freaking every bike, man.
Every bike, yeah, but Giant are particularly bad because they only make, you can reverse the clamp, but they're like the furthest you can get is 15 mil offset, right? So if you want adjustability with your seat position, you can forward and backward. So seat tube angle of the frame will be the first thing that can dictate that. So obviously the steeper the seat tube angle, the more forward your position is going to be relative to the bottom bracket. The slacker it is, the further back you go. We used to have adjustment on lots of different things. So you can adjust obviously the saddle fore aft on the rails, but again, you don't want to be in the extreme. You don't want to be all the way forward or all the way back because that limits your adjustability. You used to have a lot of choice in seat post offsets when everything was round. So you have everything from like you can get forward facing seat posts, zero offset posts, which is straight up from the seat post. And then, you can get anything from
I've seen 50 mil offset.
Is mad. So your effective seat tube angle can be changed by the offset of the seat post. Nowadays, you have to be far more precise with your frame geometry and your seat post offset because if you're lucky, a manufacturer will make two different offsets of post. Usually a 0 and something like a 15 or a 20, and that is all you got. So seat tube angle coupled with seat post offset is really important in dictating where you can achieve a particular saddle position relative to where your feet are. And that's the third really important element of fit geometry.
And the interesting thing is that I think most seat posts, seat tube angles seem to be getting steeper.
I have a theory about why, but go on.
Well, you want to get more aero, innit? Like,
Well, yeah. Maybe I'm giving bike designers too much credit for my theory.
well, the trend is to go to a more forward saddle position. It's a bit more like a time trial bike because everyone wants to get a little bit more aerodynamic. So they think that moving themselves more forward is going to put them in a more aerodynamic position or more powerful position or whatever. And that might work, that might not work. But again, I think that's trending further away from average. Like what will work for the majority of people. And so, like, we can label that as, seat tube angles are getting a bit more aggressive and demanding more from riders to sustain their positions and so on. Because essentially, the steeper your seat tube angle, the further forward your saddle sits, the more your saddle comes over the bottom bracket, the more your weight comes forward, so your body weight comes forward, and so you're going to place more weight into the front of the bike, so more weight into your hands, more weight into the shoulders, and so you either need more strength to kind of hold that position, or you're just going to get more discomfort and pain, or you can't sustain the position for as long. So there's a balancing act that needs to take place with the rider on the bike, where you place your weight distribution will determine, either how effective your pedal stroke will be and how long you can sustain your bike position for. So, that's often overlooked part of a bike fit process, where how far forward and back does your saddle need to be for your specific goals? Do you want to prioritize essentially pedaling effectiveness, or do you want to prioritize sustainability of your position? It might not be the most effective in terms of pedaling, but you can sit there for hours and hours and hours and pedal, and essentially that's it. If you want to listen to more about that, then I'll link to a previous podcast we've done, which is part of the 10 Pillars of Bike Fit series, about weight distribution on the bike and how your saddle your saddle position affects that.
But I think the thing we're getting at is that these three things, your seating position and your handlebar position via stack and reach, so stack, reach and seat tube angle, are the key things to look at. And if you don't have all three where they need to be, that bike isn't probably going to feel as good as it could do.
Yeah, it's just getting harder and harder to get it right.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the modern problem comes into play, in that, you touched on this earlier, how, components are becoming more and more proprietary. So, the ability to change and adjust things easily and cost effectively has become more difficult. A D-shaped seat post, the manufacturers locked you into that particular frame set and seat post shape, and there's only 2 offerings of it. So you need to make sure that there's tolerance within that setup so that you can achieve your particular position. And it's easier to understand with cockpits as well. So integrated cockpits, one-piece bar and stems, like cables going through the handlebars and stem and into the steerer tube. It all looks very neat, but the compromise is that there is a clear lack of adjustability. And some manufacturers, like Canyon, have gone a step further of creating completely proprietary cockpits, which look great, and by all accounts it works well, but you are totally locked into that kind of bike ecosystem. There is no experimentation which can take place if you are a self-fitter, if you want to kind of play with your bike fit and so on. Or there's very limited amount of adjustment compared with, a bike with a 2-piece handlebar stem with external cable routing, etc., etc. So it just limits your ability to play, to explore. And strangely enough, maybe as bike fitters we should be rejoicing, because it makes bike fitting before you buy a bike far more relevant, I would say. But at the
but
same
on the
time,
flip side, you are reducing the parameters in which you, or the levers that you can pull
yeah,
to get that rider where they need to be,
yeah,
or more towards where they need to be. So essentially, like if someone comes in with a bike that has an integrated cockpit, like, you know, a Canyon Air Road, you can adjust the height of the thing by 15 mil, and you can adjust the width of the handlebar. That's it. It's basically, right, let's get your saddle and your cleats in the right place, maybe look at crank length, and that's it.
yeah,
So you're just limiting your choice and your options regarding your bike position, and that you just got to go into it eyes wide open.
yeah. But this is where, like, understanding bike geometry and the shapes of bikes and how they differ becomes even more important these days, because you just have less choice. You have less options. So the heart of the, you know, the bike, which is the frame, has to be right to get you to where you need to be. And if you don't know about geometry and so on, go and find out. Like, figure it out. Like, we live in the age of the internet. There's all the information out there in the world. I'm sure AI can probably tell you, but you just need to know. You know, it's like trying to shoehorn your foot into, you know, a pair of shoes which is the wrong size or something like that. You know, you can do all the shoehorning you want, but, you know,
It's
if
not
it's
going to be right.
yeah, if you've got to run a marathon in the wrong size shoes, it's not going to be happy. That was actually a lot more complicated than they thought it was going to be, talking about geometry, but there's just so much there that needs to be talked about. But I think the key takeaway really is just, like, see if you can understand a little bit about frame stack, frame reach, seat tube angle, and understand what your body needs. Like, what is your morphology? Are you long-legged and short-torsoed, or are you long-torsoed and short-legged, long-armed? Do you have flexibility in your hips to hinge well and forward? You know, all these things which will determine kind of where your hands, bum, and your feet need to be in space, and then can you recreate that using the right frame shape. That's essentially what we're trying to get to.
Yeah, should probably do another one on this, like, as well, with regard to, like, different things within different morphologies. So femur length relative to tibia,
That's
all
good
this
fun.
kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And how potentially crank length can influence that.
Yeah.
You know, should you buy a bike based on the crank length first and then build a frame geometry around it?
Yeah. Yeah, we should talk about that one. That's a Matt Appleman special.
Yes,
one.
it is.
Yeah. If you want to get ahead of the game, go to Matt Appleman's website. He's a bike manufacturer and crank maker. But he's got a fantastic article on how all bikes should be designed really around crank length. And he's not wrong, I don't think.
Man's not wrong. That's a story for another
day. Yeah. So, yeah, takeaways are, don't think of yourself as average. You are individual. If you're really serious about your bike riding, get your bike individualized to you. Not just, don't just put yourself in certain marketing buckets. We didn't even talk about women's specific items, things like that. I think that we all know that doesn't really exist anymore. But essentially treat yourself as an individual and figure out what works for you. We've talked about before how one of our most popular saddles is the Ergon SR Women's, but we sell way more of those to men than we do to women. Whatever works. And so you don't have to pigeonhole yourself into kind of certain marketing terms, or it's certainly very easy to just fall into the marketing buckets. In order to figure out your individuality and your needs, one of the best ways to do that is come in and get a bike fit. Otherwise, you're trying to figure out what are your body proportions, what's your functionality, and what kind of frame geometry is going to work best for you around that. As always, if you've got any questions, let us know. hopefully that's been useful for you. And we will catch you on the next one. Yeah, the next one, speaking of which, is going to be all about a growth mindset.
Is that number 6?
It's going to be number
5?
Number 5.
Number 5. Yeah.
Or using mistakes as a way of growing or not being afraid of them. Anyway, you'll have to tune in next week to find out about that one. All right, catch you on the next one. Ta-da!
If you made it to the end of this episode, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed what you heard, do leave us a rating or review, as this really helps other riders find our podcast too, and motivates us to keep making more episodes. Thanks for your support, and catch you on the next one.
Suffering from numb hands, tingling toes, and any other persistent discomforts when you ride? These are all signs that your bike fit could be improved. If you're bike fit curious, get in touch with Wei or Matt by emailing info@foundation.fit or finding them on Instagram @FDN_bikefit. Finally, for all your bike servicing needs, custom dream bike or hand-built wheels, go to www.frequencycycleworks.com or find me on Instagram @frequencycycleworks. Until next time, keep on spinning.